so I apologize for the delay in the meeting this evening, but I promise you we will put our foot on the accelerator and get through this tonight.
Thank you. The sunshine notice, this meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of May 21st, 2018 was sent to the central record, Burlington County Times, and Courier Post, posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall, and has remained continuously posted as required notices under statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is attached to the open to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. Roll call, Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Franson. Mr.
Anybody here?
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Yates.
Here.
Mayor Barton.
Thanks, LaShawn. At this point, we're going to open the public comment on agenda items only. If you're interested in being heard this evening, please raise your hand. I'll call you from the center of the room. I need the microphone. Mrs. Brown is keeping the time. 3 minutes, please, for your comments. At this point, opening to the public. Stuart, come on up.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Stuart Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. Regarding item 6, resolution 2018-57, the budget, what is it about the item that's on the agenda that requires a second public hearing? That's one question. And at the end of the last meeting on the budget, there wasn't any discussion of an amendment or a special meeting, nor was there a discussion of the additional taxes that are proposed in the amendment. So I'd like to ask who wrote the resolution and how did these substantive amendments come about between the adjournment of the last meeting and the opening of this one?
Okay. Any other comments?
Is that going to be answered when it's discussed?
Probably. Okay.
Okay. Item 7, regarding the tax sales certificate 2018-61, resolution 2018-61. When you discuss that, would you explain what that's about, the who, the what, why, and when? And if you could compare that one to the Long Street tax sales that's been discussed the last meeting or two. Are these similar, different, unrelated, related?
Okay. We'll discuss it before we
Okay. Lastly, when you discuss the 2018 road program, which is item 8, could you, and I know Deputy Mayor Lee, this is sort of your wheelhouse, I'd like to know what Shamung's position is at this point, and for Mr. Guzzi, I'd like to know if there are any irregularities in the road or the right-of-way or any other physical things out there that are problems or cause problems that have to be resolved. And I was specifically thinking of the right-of-way, but I don't know if there are other known irregularities out there that need to be fixed or addressed or resolved before any road improvement decisions can go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Look forward to your answers.
Okay, thank you. We talked about at our budget hearing, it was a month ago, we talked about, and actually Rodney had indicated at that point, when indeed a public notice or re-advertising needed to take place. And Rodney had addressed that at that time. It all depended on how much was changed in the budget. I made it pretty clear before we even had the discussion that I was not interested in the tax increase in 2018's budget, so that's what kind of started the discussion. Kevin, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, there's basically 3 tests that need to be met in order to do an amendment without a second public hearing. And the one that is triggering the public hearing is if you increase or decrease a line item by more than 10%. So this does increase or decrease in this case by more than 10%, which requires a second public hearing.
So what this is doing tonight is we're introducing a resolution. We are having a public hearing on the 4th of June, so there's the ample opportunity to be able to have a lengthy discussion regarding the budget at that time. In terms of
the next meeting would be the discussion. We've already held the discussion on the budget as it was introduced.
Right.
So technically, we only need to have the public discussion on the amendment.
On the amendments, that's right. Thanks, Kevin, for clearing that up. In terms of the other questions you had, Stuart, they will be answered as we go through the meeting this evening, because we will have dialogue before each of the agenda items you referred to. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the public at this time? Mrs. Brooks?
Thank you. Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple of things. On the bill list, it's Edmonds 66, the $7,400 charge. I thought last year you did an upgrade of the program. I actually didn't have time to check the bill list from last year, but this just seems like an enormous amount of, for software and hardware maintenance, because I thought this was done last year. So if we could get some edification on that, that would be good. The other thing that I want to bring up is the fact that this is regarding the road, Carranza Road.
Which agenda item?
Well, it's going to be, I'm sorry, it's going to be on, with regard to your discussion of proposed 2018 road program,
Okay.
Carranza Road improvements.
Okay.
A follow-up on Stuart's question about Chemung. It seemed that at a previous meeting there was a discussion about Chemung not having sufficient money to join the repaving and improvement of the road, but if you look at their budget, they're anticipating a $1.2 million surplus in 2018. That's in their adopted budget. And if that's not enough money to complete, and Mr. Guzzi is engineer for, is it just the land development board, or you both? Township as well. So they certainly, $1.2 million is a hefty amount of money. I would think with those monies, they could assist the repaving of the road, no question about it. So, and as a follow-up to the tax sales certificate, it would be good if you could do a comparison of what's going on with that and why and where, who it really applies to. And,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Any other comments to the public this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public. I need a motion to approve the bills, please. Thank you, thank you, Mrs. Brown and Mr. Yates. Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Approval of minutes from the April 9th, 2018 workshop meeting. Can we even do this?
That's going to be my question.
Well, I'm listening to the recordings
Okay,
of both
so you're,
meetings.
so you've got, you're good. I think I was here. I'm certain I was here.
I missed the April 23rd meeting.
Okay. All right, well, we can still do we can still do them both for that matter. With that being said, we'll combine the April 9th minutes and April 23rd minutes into one. No, we won't.
Yeah.
April 9th, need a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I'll second. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Lee? Deputy Mayor Lee?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, everybody said yes. Thank you.
April 23rd regular meeting. I'll make the motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Same.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank
Resolution 2018-57, municipal budget amendment. Public hearing will be scheduled on June the 4th, 2018 at 6:30. Got a nice early start for that. Take a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. I'll second. Any questions or comments?
I'm looking at the numbers that were reduced, and we've already talked to Stephen about it. I'm looking at how we went from $35,000 down to $12,000 for the fire company, I'm sorry, the squad. And I want to know how this affects the balance going to the residents.
I'm sorry, could you, I'm not sure what you want.
All right, there was $35,000 in the budget that we had there
Yes.
for whatever it was that they were to write off had the resident
Yeah, this is,
insurance not covered. So what happens if we reduce it to $12,000
right.
and the actual balance billing amount is $18,000?
Okay.
How do we cover, how are we going to cover it? If the AID opinion, Attorney General's opinion says that we have to pay the balance in
I
order
mean,
to balance.
I'm not aware of what the unpaid balances are.
No, we're not gonna be aware of till the end of the year.
Right.
That's my question. So we're budgeting a lot lower than this year than what we actually paid out last year.
Correct.
So that's my concern is, are we just going to move money to cover it? Or what's our goal here? And I'm sure you
I'm
don't
not
have the
really, I'm not
answer.
really sure, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I believe that we generally make that contribution in total. I think that's that we normally just make the contribution over to them as to what we budgeted. I believe that's what we did last year.
I think they actually itemized,
I'm sorry, we did not.
No.
yeah, they actually give us an itemized write-off amount.
The first 2 years it was a straight payment,
Last year, we gave it $27,000.
and it was based on receipts. And it was the first time I think it was based on receipts, I don't remember exactly, but.
I'm just, my concern is just a matter of, does this trigger the squad turning around and balance billing the residents? You know, if they're not going to get reimbursed. I just want to know how it affects it.
I'm going to redirect from Kevin to me.
Yeah, please.
The OIG opinion requires that the township provide roughly an amount of support that's equal or thereabouts to the balance bill. So the idea is that there's not using a preferred vendor because the payment or otherwise is being made. You're allowed to give them that payment because you're offsetting unpaid balances from the public. And so the theory in the OIG opinion is that if the township contributes, so those persons contribute indirectly to the squad, which would be the support from the township,
Right.
then the township doesn't have to balance bill. So after an audit, if that was turned out to be not an equivalency, then there would have to be some adjustment made, or there would have to be a change in the way that they approach the issue as far as billing.
So basically that leaves us with the possibility of them having to balance bill residents.
Going forward, yeah. I guess that's what would be the practical result of that. That if the township doesn't provide that direct support, I know that the issue of an in-kind contribution had been discussed, and that was going to be interwoven into a negotiation with the squad in order to hopefully put these issues to bed. That in-kind contribution could be something that could be negotiated. But the raw answer to your question is the township has to provide roughly the equivalent value to the TRS in order to avoid the prohibition against waiving those unpaid balances.
So I guess the answer really is there is no answer because at the end of the day, after they hit $12,000, knowing that's what's in our budget, is it then they proceed to balance bill?
Well, they would have to make that
No,
decision.
I'm just trying to understand how this is going to affect us, and I'm
You
not trying to prolong.
you also wouldn't receive that accounting until early 2019. So I mean, a decision certainly could be made in 2019 if there was a large deficit that could be taken care of for the 2019 budget as well. Because that accounting wouldn't get to you, I wouldn't think, before
I'm
March.
trying to think when we
No,
receive.
no, their year runs October to November 1st, so they give us that accounting in late November, early December.
Okay,
Gotcha.
same result. I mean, we could do it in the 19 budget if we felt that was the proper,
Or we can transfer.
or even transfer.
My goal is just, I really don't want to see the residents' balance bill. That's ultimately, because I know there's a lot of seniors that get transported, and, I'm sure they can't afford the balance billing. And that's my concern with this amendment.
Any other comments? On the committee? Roll call, please.
Ms. Brown?
No.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes.
So, the issue now is that in order to have a budget amendment, or pass a budget, you have to have a majority of the full committee. So you need 3 votes to pass this resolution. If it doesn't pass by 3 votes, then it fails, because the statute on the budget is a majority of the full committee, which is 3.
So that vote doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're at the point where you have the budget that's been the subject without amendment that you could act on subsequently. You have a budget that
We
you
have a
haven't
budget in place
changed
that has
yet.
not been amended, or I can redo the amendment if that's another option. I can redo that now if you like.
And then re-advertise.
No, we haven't advertised yet because you haven't passed it yet. You haven't passed the amendment yet. Yeah, so anything we do tonight and you approve tonight is still going to fall within that same time frame.
Okay. Considering the fact we have 2 committee members aren't even here, and we have a public hearing scheduled on the 4th, I'm not sure why we're going to handcuff the process and have the discussion of the budget here in 2 weeks. So I'll ask for, I'll make a motion to approve this amendment. And I think it would be good if the 3 of us would agree to move this forward and have this discussion on the 4th of June.
Well-
So I'll make a motion to approve this resolution 2018-57.
That's,
We just did that.
yeah, that was just voted on.
Brown voted no,
Okay,
and Hayes voted yes.
okay, so we're done. So we have no
This is a
amendment.
material amendment to a material change to the amendment, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on to the next resolution. Resolution 2018-58, appointment of Emergency Management Coordinator, GIF Safety Coordinator, Robert Sunbury. Mr. Sunbury was appointed by Mayor Barton a couple weeks ago, I should say, and this memorializes that appointment. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2018-59, authorizing the placement of temporary signs in the public right-of-way for the Tabernacle Historical Society. Need a motion, please? Mr. Yates and Mrs. Brown, I think. You can make the second.
That's fine.
Yeah. Roll call, please.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2018-60, authorizing the release of the executive session minutes. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2018-61, authorizing the Township of Tabernacle to accept assignment of tax sale certificate 1700006. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I'll second.
Up to you,
Yeah. Anybody want to take this? Do we have a couple of questions regarding it?
The tax sale-
Doug, repeat, doesn't matter to me.
The tax sale resolution 61 is an assignment of an existing township-owned tax sale certificate or lien. The statute allows that an investor can come along and unpurchased liens can be sold for the full redemption value. It's a common practice, and so an investor has approached, is looking for municipally held liens, and has some interest in this lien, has expressed a desire to pay the full redemption value, which they can do, and the township can transfer as an assignment, and that's what's being done. That differs from the prior situation where we talked about with respect to Laurel Road, in that Laurel Road is being sold, or was attempted to be sold, or is expected to be sold or offered at a price less than the full redemption value. In order to do that, you have to go through the public process of selling the tax sale certificate, and so that's what's being done there.
Any questions or comments on the committee? Roll call, please.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2018-62, renewal of the retail consumption license for Leisure Time Inns. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, they are gonna reopen it.
I'm working on it, I'm working on it.
They're always working on it.
They're actually more working on it.
We need tear down the building next door and put it in a parking lot.
Yeah.
They're working on it.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Lee?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is a discussion on the New Jersey reforms and bonding requirements on the municipal land use law. Mayor Barton had put this agenda together, and I think I would prefer to table this until
Motion to table.
he comes back, so we'll take a motion to table. It's only a discussion item, it's not really an agenda item.
Agreed.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Subcommittee PSD position. We've been interviewing candidates over the last couple weeks. My thoughts are we're going to probably be able to make an appointment or make a recommendation to the committee for an appointment relatively soon. CFO applicants, that's yours.
I've actually received numerous applications, unfortunately.
19 to be exact.
Numerous applications are actually discarded because they did not hold the certificate required to hold the position, which left me down to 3. One person had a disconnected phone number, which left me down to 2. So I've interviewed both of those applicants, and I'm still going back and forth, haven't had an opportunity to talk to Deputy Mayor Lee about where I'm at, and I intend to have a recommendation by the next meeting where to go.
Okay. Proposed 22 road program. Dan and Doug, you guys want to tag team on this?
Yeah, regarding Carranza Road, we did have a meeting with the township, with Doug and I, and Chemung Township, as well as representatives from Senator Diego's office, and Chris Connors was actually there. Also had some representatives from Justice representing the Costello facility on Carranza Road. I thought it was a productive meeting. Senator Connors is going to reach out to the DOT to discuss the possibility of them considering a special sort of discretionary grant to enable us to finish paving or continue the paving beyond what we already have on Carranza Road for the entire length. So we're waiting to hear back from Senator Connors' office and Senator Diego, as well as Justice, has agreed to give us some letters of support and some support on their end where they can and how they can. So I think there was a productive meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to get some funding for the balance of it.
So, got anything to add to that?
Appreciate Senator Connors being there, and we're disappointed that DOT did not come, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a very productive meeting for both District 8 and District 9's offices and Chemung and us to talk about game plan. So overall, it went very well.
That's what I hear. Good discussion. Proposed sale of township-owned property. Doug, you have an update on that?
Dan has gone through.
Yeah, we did the soil borings. You may recall that the committee asked us to do soil borings on the lots so that we can include that information with potential bidders for the properties. All the lots except for 10 Richter came out good with respect to depth of seasonal high, which permits septic systems on them. 10 Richter was a little light, but that's not a lot that was going to be sold for a single family. That's one that we're going to maintain a drainage easement on and offer for sale to abutting properties, I think was the plan there. So that wasn't for single. So I think that information will assist in getting better money when the committee's ready to move forward with listing those for bid.
Thanks, Dan.
Speaking of bidding, what's our plan? Do we plan on going closed bid or open bid?
What's best way to do?
That's up to you. I mean, how you want to auction or bid the property is up to you, but you have the ability, obviously, to sell all those municipally land properties at public auction to the highest bidder. The bidding instructions are up to you. So if you wanted to conduct an actual open bid with an auction type of thing, that could be done, or you could have sealed bids. Again, the committee gets to accept or reject the bids after it's done as well. So if you're not satisfied with the prices, you can still reject the bids. That would be included in the bid instructions and bid documents. And then if parcels that are no interest in, you can offer to the contiguous property owners, potentially even for less than the assessed value, but that would come after that. So I think that at this point, I'm understanding that Doug and Dan are ready to detail, as they have done, their specific recommendation with respect to each property. So the committee just needs to go ahead and say, when to propose that ordinance and get the process underway.
We could do that at the next regular meeting, bring forward
Resolution.
the ordinance to sell those properties at that time.
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Ken, you ready to go forward on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll have it ready for June.
Okey-doke. Special event public functions parade permit. I don't have anything on this, although I know it's something that I've been working on a little bit. Have you been directed at this point to do it?
That was distributed in draft.
Right.
I redid the ordinance. I kind of dovetailed the two. The only comment from Mr. Barton at that time was that maybe if it's a regular event on an annual basis as a special event, that there would be some reduction in the permitting fee. Right now, we charged their standard, what was it, $55? $75. And so the only potential amendment was to, if you wanted to make a provision that, it be reduced to X amount if it's renewed on an annual basis.
Now, this ordinance, this would not affect, let's say, the Methodist Church that has their, let's say it's a spaghetti dinner or it's a chili cook-off. It's an event. This ordinance would not affect them in any way, shape, or form, am I correct?
The special event, unless it exceeded that minimum threshold with respect to expected occupants, it wouldn't be obligated to get a permit into that. So I would encourage you to look carefully at the definition of special event, because it applies across the board, but it contemplates a pretty big function. But that's specifically listed in the definition, and you can tweak that at the time of consideration if you had some concerns in that regard.
So it would affect the Marriage Festival.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of reducing the fee. I don't know why what's the...
It was the thought that was brought up, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective so you could, have it listed if you'd like to for June as well. Mr. Barton had mentioned it would be something to think about, and so I can easily make that change. And then again, when you get your draft, I would encourage you to take a good look at the definition of special event. That'll answer your concern.
Why don't we do this? Are we all in agreement that we want to put this on an agenda and have some discussion of that and get it passed?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you up for that?
Yeah, I'd like to re-review it to make sure that,
So I'll get a draft out. Do you want, well, the draft's out, so
Yeah.
if you want me to make a modification, you can provide your comments, and then on first reading, you can either direct me to make further modifications, or you can adopt it as written. Or not.
Mr. Sunbury, something.
Well, I think we ought to, get it on our agenda and we're going to discuss it anyway, for a public comment about it. Let's get it on the agenda.
Okay. So have that, it's already out, so Sean can just add it to the agenda.
Okay.
And then just let Joe know, let Joe, that right now there hasn't been any modification for an annual event, but that discussion is expected.
The idea, I have to give credit to Colonel Lowe, because I looked at an agenda for the LDV, and the Pine Breads Festival came before us. And Colonel Lowe and I had talked often about different large events that are held in the town, but also about large events that are held in other neighboring municipalities. And Chemung Township had passed an ordinance, not necessarily to be any kind of blockage for doing events, but mainly to look at the safety side of events, because we're in a day and age where we have to be very cognizant of the safety and security of large events. And what this ordinance does is it allows the opportunity for the event organizers and the municipal government to sit down and kind of go through a game plan along with the folks that are thinking about that kind of stuff. So we can certainly make modifications in language for, you know, the events at the Methodist Church or whatever, but I think at the very least it's something that we need to get rolling with immediately, as we have a large event coming to us relatively soon, not to mention Senator graduation in 3 weeks. So I think it's something we need to get moving on relatively in short order. So
Certainly, your OEM should comment on that, at some point.
the OEM, the former OEM, and I reviewed the very first draft, and he's made modifications to it, which is what resulted in the draft review. I'm not sure whether Mr. Sunbury's had an opportunity to be able to review it, but I can find out here in a second when he does his emergency management coordinator report. So at this point, let's put it on an agenda for an upcoming meeting. Any other comments from the committee? At this point, we'll ask Mr. Sunbury for his report.
Okay, sir. Should I just stand up and do it from here?
You can come right up here to the front,
All right.
and that's who you are. Actually, no, yeah, do that. This is Bob Sunbury, our new emergency management coordinator.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so I was appointed April 29th, followed up the next day by spending a week at the New Jersey Emergency Preparedness Association Conference. I'm getting a lot of good, valuable education there, emergency management basic training, incident command system forms, and incident action plans, and communications for emergency managers, because social media in this day and age is actually more effective than the old telephone, and more timely than the newspapers. We had Pineland CERT Regional Monthly Meeting with search and rescue coming in from the county to talk to the CERT and potentially giving us some training so we can help out as additional resources for search and rescue. We also had a CERT hurricane tabletop exercise, which is timely with hurricane season beginning. Provided support from the CERT and as OEM for the Pedal for Promise fundraiser. I attended a pre-planning meeting with them to express the concerns of the Township Committee to make sure that they're fully addressed prior to the event. So we talked about the issues with people obeying the rules of the road, having the motorcyclists in the past, blocking traffic with their bicycles, and also shared the incident action plan and those concerns with the Red Lion Barracks, who had no idea that the event was going to be taking place and were very appreciative of our communication. I also attended a pre-construction meeting for the radio towers at the Emergency Services Building. We had our first GIF Safety Committee meeting, our first local Emergency Planning Committee meeting, and reviewed updated the incident action plan for the Memorial Day Parade. I also followed up attending this past Friday a mandatory meeting for the 2018 Emergency Management Agency Assistance Award, which gets the township $10,000 a year to support emergency management activities, which is part of the FEMA Emergency Management Performance Grant Program. One of the beauties of attending this and learning about these grants is part of the grant is a municipal work plan which stipulates all of the things that a good emergency manager and good emergency management program is to accomplish. So it's really nice to have check sheets for that kind of stuff. And lastly, I've started reaching out to local, county, and state partners. And just as a quick follow-up to the question of the resolution for the event planning, I've been working with Colonel Lowe and learning the ropes. And when we have significant events, I am actually required to submit to both the county and the state Department of Homeland Security so that they're aware of any significant gatherings of people and the potential risks that might exist with that. So by putting in a system that triggers them, forces them to sit down and meet with us here in the township, better enables us to be assured that we're going to be fulfilling those reporting requirements and making sure that these events are going to occur safely. So I am fully in favor of that. So, thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Bob?
So hit the ground running, sir.
Thank you much, appreciate it.
Excellent.
Memorial Day Parade Committee, also known as a rec committee, Mr. Ramirez here somewhere. I thought.
Actually, he was.
Here.
He's no longer here.
He's fine.
He's gone. Okay. We're stopping the parade, right?
Parade's still scheduled.
Okay, what can you tell us about the parade?
Weather looks good so far in the long-range forecast. It will be over the same as it's been in the past, starting at Santa School parking lot and coming down, stopping at the cemetery, and then ending here for the memorial service and wreath laying service. So that should be the same.
That was the beginning.
But at least it's supposed to be sunny. So.
It's supposed to rain tomorrow.
The Public Works will be working on getting the grounds and the parade route in fine shape along with the help of the county. So that's where we are right now.
We have a grand marshal for
Yes, we do.
the grand marshal.
That would be the question I don't know the answer to.
Okey doke. All right, well, hopefully you'll be there on Saturday. I'm sure you will be. Okay.
Mark knows all this information. I thought Mark was going to be here, so.
Yeah, Joe does too. He told me I just forgot.
He's shooting.
It's not a she. He told
But
me.
it could be a she.
Well, absolutely it could be, and it has been a she. Mrs. Bond was a grand marshal one year.
Right.
We have a speaker and a grand marshal, and I don't want to confuse the two.
We have a speaker too?
We have a speaker.
Speeches at this thing? You come? Bring your flag.
Flags already?
Ready to go.
Yep.
Thanks, Doug. Dan Guzzi, anything else?
Yeah, just one more thing. The committee's aware that the Scenic Reserve project at Residential Development has been, has basically gotten all its approvals. The last item of significance was the DOT permit, which has been issued but needs to be executed by the township, since the township will ultimately be the owner of the road that ties into Route 206. It's probably been many, many years that you've seen this before, because typically the residential developments haven't been on Route 206. So this is a permit application, or a permit that needs to be signed by a township official, which I can do as as township engineer, but I certainly didn't want to do that. So let you guys know what's going on and got the nod to go ahead and sign that. Basically, it's not obligating anything other than ultimately we'll take over that road when the development is completed and the bonding is all in place.
Okey-doke. Any objection from the committee for Dan to travel down that avenue? Okay.
Okay, we'll get that signed and sent in, and I expect that they will be breaking ground on that development shortly.
Great. Anything else?
That's it, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Doug?
Public Works is still working on the brush cleanup, both the normal collection and the storm damage. We are finished the first two sections of town. We are working the third. This last rainy week has not been great helping us making a lot of progress, but we are still working towards that, running 2 crews when we can and 1 crew most of the other days. We also have a subcontractor working with us when they're available. As this is a busy time of year for all the subcontractors that do that type of work, so we're using him when he's available. This coming week is also a National Public Works Week. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the staff of Public Works for all their hard, diligent work over the winter, and looking forward to having a successful year this year. We also are
It's okay. We can come back to you if you want.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Pete?
Yes, we can do that.
Thanks, Pete.
The only other issue I have,
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that Doug,
We're working together.
no, sure, I apologize, I was just wanting to check 1 second with Doug.
Did Doug remember what he wanted to say?
I was trying to remind him, and at least part of
Did he
one of the
remember?
things an issue.
Okay, so why don't we go back to Doug?
Okay.
Doug, what do you got?
We have a situation on Irix Causeway, a section between Seward Place Road and Cow Place Road, where a resident, on advice of their council, has decided to claim it as their property and close it. We have been working with Pete and working with Dan, making sure that the road is in the proper location. We have put barricades outside of their non-reflective ones, so no resident pulls onto the street and hits telephone pole or regular no trespassing sign. And Pete has been working with their attorney to resolve the issue.
Is it not a township road?
It is a township road.
So why don't we take the barricades down?
We were waiting for where Pete was going to be with the attorney.
So why would we need to pay Pete's legal fees because a resident put barricades up in a township road? What am I missing?
Well, it's not as clear cut as he put up barricades in the middle of Krantz Road. So,
No.
it is a dirt road. It is listed on the survey as by tax map only. So I think that Doug exercised some restraint and wanted to make sure that there wasn't an issue because he had done so. He had blocked the road apparently on the advice of council. And you know, I think that in fact it's undisputedly a public road. I do need to do a little looking into the subdivision of the lots out there to see how those lots were created, to see if there was a plat filed or any subdivision plan. But the bottom line is Irix Causeway Road is a road that's existed on the tax map for as long as Doug can remember and as long as any copy of any tax map around would depict. Apparently the road has historic origins and that's often how a road ends up on the tax map. That might not be any specific public dedication. The law on such an issue is that if there is a public dedication by prescription, in other words, just because it was laid out historically and the public used it and the public maintained it and the public plowed it and improved it, then it's a public road that predates, and there are many of them, right? That predate any type of municipal land use type of scheme where there's a public dedication of a right-of-way or in the form of a map or subdivision. So I want to confirm those facts. I think that in fact that's exactly what we have here is an historic road that's been on the tax map. No one's ever challenged it because it predates anyone being here, more or less. But it's never been improved with macadam or otherwise. But it's been maintained for decades and decades. It's been plowed for decades and decades. It's used by the public as a connecting road. We heard complaints from people that were denied access to the road. So I did provide information to the attorney. I did demand that his client be directed to remove those barricades, indicating that the township would. I even indicated that we thought that activity posed a risk and that there could be liability associated with those actions, criminal and otherwise, because he knowingly places barricades in a road that he knows is used by the public on a regular basis. To me, that creates a dangerous condition. So I've communicated all of that. I've indicated it's the township's position this is a public right-of-way, and that we would pursue whatever remedy, including unilaterally removing those barricades, which Doug and I have discussed. Beyond that, the remedy is for the township to accept that right-of-way. Okay, and the way the law is that when that public dedication is made, it's held open forever until the township vacates the road, rejects that public dedication, or otherwise officially says, okay, we're gonna take the road. So I think ultimately what I'm going to do is get together with Doug and Dan, talk about how that would be legally described, how that would be recorded, and I'd ask you to consider having me prepare an ordinance which would accept that public right-of-way, officially make it a township road to be based on a deed or a plat that would then be recorded, which we would then record. And then for all perpetuity, there would be no further question. But in my mind, based on the initial information, my initial investigation, my initial review of the law, this is a public road that predates any kind of specific dedication. So the only thing that's left for the township to memorialize that public purpose is to accept it as such and record that acceptance.
So we're looking at essentially another 2 weeks or whenever we meet next to get this resolved. Or it'll be longer than that at this point.
Well, I'm going to discuss with the attorney what they're willing to do. I provided information and I had a telephone call. I've not had a response to my latest inquiry, and I did ask them to reply at their earliest convenience, given the public urgency that exists with closing a public road. So, again, based on the facts as I understand them today, I need to look at how those lots were created out in that area, how any other roads were laid out, when that was done. Then I can come to a final determination as to whether or not there's a public dedication. But it certainly, I don't see any, I think it's highly likely to be confirmed as such by taking a look at that historic record.
Okay. Anything else?
So would you like me to prepare such a resolution or ordinance by the township so you could consider it in June, accepting what's long been a public dedication, so that we could then subsequently record it? And again, put the issue to bed. No one would ever then subsequently be able to challenge whether or not that's a public roadway. And again, I wanted the facts as we understand them to be clear. The road's been there for how long in your estimation?
It's been there
At least?
At least 50 years.
At least, and beyond that, because you don't know, right? Exactly. The road's been maintained and plowed for how long?
All my 31 years here.
Are we good with the resolution? Okay. You got 3 yeses for resolution.
All right, we'll get that going, thank you.
Doug, anything else?
Just a question from LaShawn is, are we having the June 4th meeting at this point in time?
Yeah, I was going to ask the committee for consent for directing the clerk to advertise for a meeting on the 4th of June.
I think we should.
Okay, Kim?
Sure.
Okay.
6:30, okay?
Yep, 6:30 is fine.
Primary election next day.
Yep.
Thank you, that's all I
So
have.
it's up to us at this point. Okay, nothing else, Doug?
Nothing else,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks. Pete, anything else?
Nothing else, thank you.
Joe? Nothing. Kim?
I just wanted to point out that something that I didn't know, but I recently found out that May is actually National ALS Month. ALS being a horrific disease. And I also recently found out there are only 500 people in the state of New Jersey that are affected by this disease. And unfortunately, my husband is one of them. But I say that because there's so much research that still needs to be done, and yet there's still no actual you know how we usually have a proclamation proclaiming a month for cancer and things like that? They actually do not have one for a disease such as this, so I find it very sad that they don't, because it's such a devastating disease. Thank you.
Okay. I want to go back to the committee for a second. I'm glad we got the meeting out of the way. This is kind of uncharted territory for me personally, since I've been on committee in terms of getting a budget passed. But I'm going to ask the committee if we are certain we don't want to have any kind of resolution for a budget, because unfortunately Kevin's left because he had no reason to be here. But I believe that we're now subject to state review. Is that correct?
We're self-reviewed as of this year.
Right now we are. Yeah. But the fact we don't have a resolution or a budget's a bit of a problem.
There your tax bills out.
Yeah.
And it can be as far as DCA also.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask the committee if we're certain we don't want to, and unfortunately, we've already voted down this resolution. I'm not quite sure what our options are at this point. This is kind of, as I said, it's uncharted territory for me. So I'll go back to the folks in the committee that have been here longer than me. What do we do now, folks?
Well, all the years I've been here, I don't ever recall this happening, to be very honest with you.
Well, being the no vote, you know what my concern is. My concern is having the residents balance bill.
Well,
And I want something that prevents, my concern is preventing the residents from receiving a bill for ambulance service.
Okay, I guess forget the ambulance service for a minute. What do we do in terms of a resolution for budget? Because I mean, we're essentially handcuffing the whole budget for ambulance service, and I'm trying to figure out what do we do from here. I mean, we've got to get a resolution, have a public hearing on the budget. I mean, frankly, I don't know what to do next here, guys. And I think if we're going to handcuff the whole budget over an ambulance service, I think it's irresponsible. Let's know, what do we need to do? I don't know what to do next.
Can we re-vote on this at another meeting?
No, actually,
Or will
I
we
asked-
have to do a whole new resolution?
I asked for that. Well, Sean indicated that we had already voted this resolution down, so that's it for this resolution. Is that correct?
Correct.
So are we allowed to do a new resolution?
Yeah, any kind of modification would allow you to attempt to pass a new resolution, yes.
Given the fact that the committee sat here and went through this, and it's not even, I mean, frankly, you know, I'm running the meeting for Joe. Joe's the mayor, and Joe has worked on this. I'm not going to make any modifications to it without any discussion with the full committee, but unfortunately, you know, all we had to do was vote for this to have a discussion, the 3 or 5 of us, whoever shows up on the 4th, to have some dialogue about it, and we don't even have that opportunity. So I'm not quite sure what to do next, unless we want to just kick it down the road, and the state's going to have to deal with it, and so will Kevin. So unless we're going to do something different, I'll move on to the public comment portion of the meeting.
Well, unless you're going to modify, go ahead.
Deputy Mayor, that was what was asked to be put together previously at the last meeting. The cuts that were in there, you received copies of that earlier. It's basically the same thing that you had, except that it puts the 30,000 back into it. That's for your review, that's all.
Okay, well, this isn't the resolution that was in the packet that we have, nor was the resolution that was advertised. This is the resolution that was advertised.
This is true.
There's nothing that was
Yeah,
advertised.
it would have been advertised for the public hearing had you adopted it tonight.
Oh, okay.
But the other document that I was talking about was the document that reflects the changes of the discussion of the meeting, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
So this is not, these do not reflect the discussion. These reflect,
What doesn't?
what we were voting on tonight,
What document are we
This-
talking about?
the document we voted on this evening
Okay.
does not reflect the discussion of the meeting where there was changes. This is a different document.
That's not accurate, actually. But that's
Well,
okay.
it's accurate to the minutes I listened to.
Okay. I don't think it is, because I had made the recommendation that we cut this number, because for the first 2 years that the rescue squad had billed us, we had paid $70,000 towards that, so they wouldn't have to balance bill, and they only ended up they billed less than that for at least 2 consecutive years I'm aware of. And last year was the first time we'd ever done itemized numbers for the billing. But I'm not really, to be honest with you, the thing that concerns me is the fact that we don't have a resolution for budget, and we don't have all the members of the committee here to even talk about it. So it's disappointing that we can't even agree on a resolution for the budget and talk about it collectively. But that's what we've decided to do tonight.
Well, the resolution would then go into the budget, and it becomes the budget that you're now voting on.
Right, but you have a five-way dialogue in 2 weeks to budget.
So you have a five-way dialogue of what you're proposing to be the finalized number.
That's right.
So if you still don't agree, I say I still don't agree with this, it would, at that point, it necessarily wouldn't matter if everybody else agreed.
But you can't even have that dialogue now. That's my point.
Well, we could have, I'm sorry, I told you my reasoning why,
Okay,
and I think it's a valid reason.
okay. All right.
Doug's just mentioning, you can reintroduce whatever you want on the 4th. You'd have to have a subsequent public hearing.
But you have to advertise that before the meeting, wouldn't you?
On the 4th, will be 2 days prior to, yes.
Okay.
So you can, the next meeting would be the 4th, and the following one would be like June 25th, so you
Yeah,
can
so-
probably adopt on the 25th of June.
Yeah, but I think that's later than what Kevin wants. It's a big concern for Kevin because we have to have it done by June 1 before the radar, before Tabernacle starts to light up on the state's radar. So, okey doke. Well, at least, at the very least, we still have the 6:30 meeting, and hopefully it'll be, you've got elections the next day, so hopefully it'll be efficient. Okay. At this point, we're going to open up the meeting, before I open up the meeting for public comment, any other discussion from the committee? I just wanted to point out Mayor Barton, can I have that back?
You want that?
Yeah, you gave it to me. Mayor Barton sent me a note this morning. He was sick and was unable to be at the meeting, and Mr. Franzen had indicated at actually our last meeting he wouldn't be here this evening. So with that being said, we're going to open up the meeting for public comment. If you're interested in being heard this evening, please raise your hand. I'll call on you, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Mrs. Brooks has the clock.
No, that's Mrs. Brooks.
I mean, Mrs. Brown has the clock, sorry.
You were going to be the
I
timer.
was looking at Fran, I was looking at Bob. You already talked.
I can be a timer too.
Long, But
Who are
I
you?
answered
Can
your
you
question.
tell
Bob
us Can
Sunbury,
you tell us who you are?
as emergency manager for Tabernacle.
Thank you.
Having sat in on the parade planning committee, I did dig through my notes and wanted to inform you that George Horner will be our grand marshal for the parade. And our speaker, who apparently is an excellent speaker, is Major General Rocco Negris. So those are the participants setting up our parade for this year. Wanted to follow through on your question.
Excellent.
And just an interesting anecdote is, last week I was driving my son off with a friend on Cricket's Mill Road. Google Maps said to get back to town, make a right turn on the Eric's Mill Causeway. I went to make the turn, and there's a telephone pole with a sign on it across the road. And I thought, am I going to say anything to Doug? And I didn't, but somebody else did. But honest to goodness, Google Maps sends you down there.
It's
I'm
a
like,
road.
what, it's a dirt road? But it's there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We've got a couple of those that are like that. Yeah. Any other comments on the committee, or for the committee?
Let's do
Mrs.
it.
Brooks, come on up. Which is on there.
Graham Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. I wanted to ask Mr. Lang, in your March invoice, you had 3 charges that were called General SSA Court. And what do those refer to?
My billing is provided to the township. You know, if they want me to respond to a question that's talking about that, I think that invades the attorney-client privilege a bit. I'm not going to really respond to specific questions about the billing unless directed to do so.
Well, I don't know how an invoice is attorney-client privilege, but SSA Court, you can't speak about what this billing is for and who it's with?
Oh, I can, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's all I'm asking. What is I think SSA stands for Shared Services Agreement.
If the committee wants me to respond, I'd be happy to do that. Again, I think asking questions about the attorney's billing runs dangerously close to invading the attorney-client privilege, so I think that often the information that would be offered, or could be offered, which is responsive, would be privileged information. So with that, I'll indicate to the committee that if they'd like me to respond to specific concerns, I can do that. Otherwise, I think the invoices speak for themselves. Certainly, if the administrator has questions about my invoices, I'm always available to respond to them. So I'll do whatever the committee would like me to do.
Are you going to give your attorney permission to explain what this means when it's a public charge?
Well, it's actually, it's public comment, so the floor is yours at this point.
Okay. It must have to do with the Woodland Township agreement, right? It's shared services agreement, the court. So you are charging for the services that you provided in regards to the shared services agreement with Woodland. I guess, but I just wanted that verified. I mean, this is $372 of our money. So I find your explanation a little bit strange, but we're inconsistent with certainly my understanding of attorney invoices. There's also another thing. At the meeting, last meeting, Chief Jackson made comments about the Tabernacle OG opinion, and that he was concerned that about being in conformance with it. I'm not sure how he can claim that TRS is in conformance with the Tabernacle OG opinion, because they're carrying it, conducting billing for Chemung residents at the expense of Tabernacle residents. And these OIG opinions are generally, they are municipal, they could be county too, county specific, so, or municipal specific, but since they're getting service, providing free services to Chemung, I don't know how they can be in conformance with the Tabernacle OIG opinion which they received. It at least appears that it's a misuse of that opinion. The other thing is this notion that Mrs. Brown, that the TRS has to, we have to pick up the bill, the balance of the billing. TRS has, and this is done in many townships, they can send out the bills. If people don't pay them, they just write them off. And it's done, the closest town that's doing it is Medford, and I believe in Southampton is doing it as well. So it's not true that our residents are going to get balanced billed, because there is an avenue for avoiding that. And people on this committee keep putting forward that, oh my God, people aren't going to receive charity care. It's kind of this low-level fear-mongering that's going on. And I think it really should be clarified that they can balance bill, if they don't collect the money, and they write it off, and they're able to do that. So I just think that should be clarified. The other thing that I think I wanted to bring up has to do with the budget. So there is definitely going to be a budget meeting on the 4th.
There will be a meeting on the 4th. Whether or not it's a budget meeting is to be determined at this point.
Okay, so you'll be putting out a notice that specifies what the meeting's about? Okay, that's all. Oh, the other thing was that the only thing that you didn't answer was the Edmonds issue. Didn't we update that program last year, or are they doing a whole new complete update?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The Edmonds bill on the bill list for $7,400.
Okay.
Okay, so is your okay a non-answer or an answer?
Excuse me?
Is it a non-answer or an answer? I'm just trying
I
to
was
find out.
acknowledging your comment. It's public comment period. You're past your period at this point, and we can address it
Thank
after
you
the
very
meeting.
much.
Thank you.
Can I just want to respond to Mrs. Brooks if you don't mind.
Of course.
You said that Medford is a soft bill. I've not been soft billed by Medford or Eastham Township. Both of them do continue to bill you and don't write it off.
That's not what I've been told directly.
I'm just telling you
Okay.
from a personal experience, those two towns do continue to bill.
So it's unfortunate that Kathy Berger isn't here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the accident that I'm talking about predates Kathy Berger, but at the time it did, and the same with Eastham.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't know, I've been fortunate not to have had an accident and need to be transported from either town since, but when I had, they were a hard bill.
Okay, because I think the information I have is pretty current.
Well, I'm just telling you
Yeah.
from
Okay,
personal experience.
that's fair enough, that's fair enough.
I think
Sure.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Brooks. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Brooks?
Stuart Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. I also made comments this meeting and last meeting that didn't get answers, and they were issues that I think did have answers. I think they just got lost in the shuffle. Last meeting I asked regarding the 2019 and 2012 capital improvement plan. I asked what the plans were for the township improvements to enter that 5 million, new structures such as public works or town hall, improvements that might be made to the second floor like the elevator. And I know that that's just a plan, it's not a hard document, but I did want to know and still want to know what is it that the township collectively has on its mind that costs that much. And I'd appreciate an answer to that. I also asked earlier today, I asked if the discussion on the Carenza Road would address any known problems with the right-of-way of Carenza Road. And frankly, I heard that the right-of-way was split by the municipal boundary. I didn't know if that's accurate or not, but I was looking to get some clarification from Mr. Guzzi's view on that or any other known issues that existed. So I want to reiterate that one. And the second comment, if I can group all those together, is obviously this room's been recently improved and painted. It looks great. The judge's platform has been improved. I also know that we have a Woodland Township agreement that begins in November to share court services there. And I also know from the agenda that you're going into executive session to discuss possible acquisition of Sequoia, which one would think would be a possible answer or the answer to the often discussed expansions of this building, which presumably could hold a municipal court building. So there are a lot of questions in there. I'd like the committee to address sort of the sequence of how these happened, and did we invest in improvements too far in advance or not, as these possibilities have unfolded? I would like an answer to that. Lastly, I'll give you my comments, Pete, on the attorney-client privilege for an invoice. I suppose, I understand you when you say I think you're getting dangerously close to attorney-client privilege. I think you're miles away from attorney-client privilege. I'm aghast at that. And this is the expenditure of public funds. There's hardly any advice given by saying X hours times Y rate equals the bill of whatever the bill was. And not knowing what the money was spent on is just, I think it's not even close to attorney-client privilege. I think it's closer to concealment of what the public should know. And I would like to think that the committee would stand for that sort of thing. And I'd like to hear you speak up on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
Name is now 14 Road. Got a bit of a drainage problem in front of my house.
That's Land Development Board. They meet when? Wednesday? What do you got here? I'm kidding.
Okay,
Nice to
kind of
see you.
ended my rope on it. And I know Public Works is very busy. First time I came to the township about it, not a meeting, but the township was 2004. I was replacing the pipes at the end of both driveways. Ran into my neighbor at the time, different neighbor, pumping water out to the road. New neighbors now, still doing it. I got a inspection failure report. I have not spoke with Mr. Boyd. He seems to be very difficult to get a hold of. I've left 3 messages, 2 with his secretary, 1 of voicemail. So this failure report was sent to the wrong address. It should have been sent to my neighbor. I think they took care of that since then. But like I said, first time 2004, second time 2014, it's 2018, I'm still dealing with it. Doug knows as well as I do that there's a pipe that runs under a new road, should take that water to Bear Swamp. That pipe's been broke for a long time, probably prior to 2004. I do need to speak with Mr. Oatman. I do pay taxes in Southampton, so, and I run with the firehouse really in Southampton. So I do need to speak with him because it's kind of, I'm on the border, so it's both townships kind of a problem. But when inlets were put on New Road, I don't know who had anything to do with that, if it was a different engineering company. They put them on both sides of New Road, they just didn't put any down near where I am, where the lowest point of the road is, for whatever reason. So mosquitoes, lots of water. There was a car accident last August. A young lady flipped her car in the ditch. So now you have, she ripped up the grass and everything. Now you have dirt eroding from New Road. So, kind of been dealing with this for a long time and getting tired of it and not getting a call back from the, I know his secretary's telling me that maybe this isn't something he should deal with, since all he did was the inspection failure letter. But I just want to talk to him and say, what kind of inspection did you do if you got the address wrong? You know?
He said he would have been here enough.
Yeah, he's pretty good at getting back to you. I haven't found him difficult to get a hold of him, but I can understand that there must be some mitigating circumstance. I'm sure he will follow up.
But once again, I don't think this is going to be
his bailiwick.
Yeah, well, that's my point. Where does it go?
It actually, it starts with him, but if it moves on to Dan.
That was the first phase of the new road. New road was done in 3 phases, if I'm correct. I think that was the first phase.
Yeah.
So that was,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I go back pretty far. So Jerry Milstein built those homes, just like he built the houses in Shadow Oaks. My uncle Robin was his right-hand man, was my guy. My dad was the mason. So I know the whole story behind, like, those homes obviously were built, you know, when they started digging, they were finding white sand pretty early.
Right, but
Some of those houses, most of them don't have basements.
right, but the drainage is a concern.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
But that, when that pipe broke, I think that was on Southampton's side. So the pipe should have been repaired, or, you know what I mean?
We've jetted it. We've jetted it a couple times. We don't get all the way through. That's the problem.
Right. And Mr. Oven's well aware that his guys come down there and they throw a cold patch on that line where the pipe is. I mean, you don't have to be very bright to understand that the pipe has broken and you're throwing cold patch on a crack that's just continuing to cave in. I mean, if I don't maintain that swale, because nobody else on New Road maintains the swale. Everyone was told to put pipes in under their driveways in 1975. Nobody maintained it. If I didn't maintain my 360 feet, there'd be water coming across New Road, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
But we have to deal with the pipe, the people that are pumping the water into the ditch first, and that's why we started at the top.
right, and I hope they do, and I think that'll help part of the problem. And I know we've had a lot of rain recently, it's just,
If they ran it out back instead of out front, your front yard wouldn't be as wet as it is. I'm not saying
Someone had
your
a mosquito
backyard
problem,
would be.
but yeah. All right.
But we discussed this on the phone.
Right.
Ian, are you available by phone tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Okay. And Tom's got your number?
He should, his secretary took it twice, so.
Okay. You talk to Tom in the morning, make sure that it's okay. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I don't think he'll be able to tomorrow. Any other comments to the public at this time? Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer. I've got something else for the meeting.
Stephen Kramer, 1000 Old Indian Mills Road. Been up here time and time again over the past, I feel like it's been 3 years we've been discussing emergency services since your initial report, or the start of your initial report. I'm not interested in the facts and the figures of it. Just like you said tonight, you weren't interested in the facts and the figures of it anymore. I want to speak, it felt emotional tonight from that end of the table. It feels like you're going after the squad because you're angry about something or somebody, or you're not happy with the services being provided. And I get that. I'm not here to argue whether that's right or wrong or where that should be placed. But I've had some of you stand in my driveway when you were looking to be reelected and talk to me about Old Tabernacle. You know, I'm living in a house that was built by a guy buried across the street 8 generations ago. I understand the old Tabernacle feel. And what I've learned from those big names of, people I used to get tutelage from or get told to take my hat off when I was in the building, which I'm obviously not listening to down at Ricky's Picnic in the summertime, was the Tabernacle helps one another. That's been the tried and true thing that's followed all this time. The Tabernacle, when push comes to shove, help one another. And I don't see, I listened to the discussion last month. I thought the discussion of the committee was good. I understand where you started. I saw where you ended. I thought you made the right decision. I don't know what happened between that meeting and this meeting where we went from 30 to 12. But you're not screwing squad members. If that's where this is, if this is an anger that we're going to get the squad, because the squad becomes this thing that we just talk about, like we talk about they over there, and those guys over there, and those people that we don't like over there. And you maybe lose track of what I see in the back of the truck, which is the people that are being helped by that. And I know that 2 or 3 of your constituents will come here every month and say that we should be doing it this way or that way, or that we're doing it poorly, and that's completely their right, and I applaud, as a civics teacher, their desire to be here. But I would hope that before June 4th, you think about the other 6,900 people that don't come here every month, that don't tell you how they feel. That when you give speeches out front 2 years ago, when you talk about 2 little girls who frankly shouldn't be here, and you talk about the teamwork it took between both agencies sitting in the room to get that done, you talk about what a miracle that was, and the fact that the town came together to support them. And yet, we're cutting these people out. And I know that we're going to say it's fear-mongering. It just isn't. And you know the facts and the figures. You've done the research. You've put the report together. You understand. You've sat in the rooms. You've nodded your head and said you get it. And I don't understand what taking the money away and possibly. We don't even know. And we've referred a lot of decision-making in the last few months to the new public safety director because we don't know. That's not our wheelhouse. We don't understand the specifics of that. We've established quite a few times, if you'll allow me just to finish this thought, we've talked quite a few times about we're not sure what this is going to make us do. I know what the OIG opinion is. You know what the OIG opinion. There's different opinions of what that means and how that in kind and contract negotiations and where we go from there. But in the interim, before we have that contract, I don't want to put a grandmother that's on a fixed income that happens to have some problems with respiratory medication into collections, because that's what I have to do until we figure that out. And I don't want to have that young couple that live on the other side of town who have an infant who by no fault of their own ends up in the back of my truck several times a month. I don't want to have to send them to collections until we figure out what in-kind means and what the building's worth and all that. I'm not saying you don't get here eventually, that you don't look at this next year and say, hey, you know what, we did the research and we figured it out, and we're going to cut it back and we're going to force them to balance bill, or we figured out in the contract how to make it work other ways that aren't financial. But it just seems like the emotion has gotten in front of the facts and the figures. And I would hope that the amount of time that this committee, I've watched you take a lot of time and a lot of thought on a lot of different things. Backyard chickens, for an example, have gotten a whole lot of thought, and you've done a lot of research, and you went and figured that all out, and I would hope that we don't just cut this money before we figure out, you said tonight you don't know. You admitted it out loud. I don't know if this, we don't either. You've talked about last meeting, getting your own OIG opinion to say that we can do it that way. I think we'd be in agreement. We've sat down before. I think we would sit down again. I just hope that we don't put the residents, the other 6,900 people that aren't in the room, who are happy with the service and happy with helping each other out and taking care of one another, behind the people who are in this room that don't feel that way. So I thank you for giving me the extended time.
Mr. Kramer, I wanted to clarify one thing. You mentioned that I'm not interested in facts and figures. That's totally inaccurate. I'm very interested in facts and figures, but what I was trying to get addressed tonight was I was trying to get the resolution passed so we can have the discussion in 2 weeks and get the budget done. That's what I was trying to do.
Deputy Mayor, if you'll allow me, I listened to the discussion last month. You know I'm here every month. And what was presented tonight in the amendment is not what was presented in the discussions and what was decided on last month, and it took me by surprise, so that's why I brought it up.
Okay, well, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I'm not the mayor, and I got a phone call from the mayor this morning that he was going to be here. I'm running the meeting. All I know is there's a resolution here. I was trying to get passed. It didn't get passed. I'm not sure where we're headed next.
I appreciate the honesty.
The other thing I wanted to point out was, and I'm glad you came up because it reminded me of this. First of all, before I do this, are there any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public. After probably 2.5 years, or probably longer than that, probably about 3 years worth of work, Verizon Wireless has approved 46 FiOS applications for Tabernacle, VFR applications. This is huge for us, specifically for myself and Mr. Kramer, to be specific. Mr. Moore also, as a matter of fact. As many of you know, this is something I've worked on for several years and tried to get accomplished. What it boils down to is that, as many of you know, folks like Mr. Kramer, the Moores, and I, and even the Brookses actually don't have access to high-speed internet. We don't have the option for Comcast. We don't have DSL in our houses. And I worked over the last 3 years to try to get us qualified, and Tabernacle qualified those residents that didn't have service for this BFRR program, or Bona Fide Retail Request Program. After a long process, Verizon has indicated to us that out of all the applications we sent them, which were roughly 60, that 46 were approved for broadband service. What that means is that at this point, out of those 46 applications, we need to get a service contract signed and also deposited for Verizon. What that then means is that once they receive the number of applications that were approved, once they receive those applications or the service contracts and the money, that the clock begins to tick. And Verizon is mandated by state law or a state BPU ruling to provide internet service to those areas. So I'm very pleased we were able to get to this point, but we're not quite there. I've got to get the applications back and also get the checks, and what our plan is to deliver them directly to Verizon so nothing gets lost in the crack and they can't say, oh, we don't have a check or whatever the case may be, but because of the pushing uphill that we've been able to get this accomplished. So I appreciate you coming up because it reminded me to talk about that. The other thing is I want to address Mr. Brooks' comments regarding capital improvements. Capital improvements is a moving target. And what I mean by that is that it's a work in progress. This committee has dialogue and debate, and Mr. Franzen's the one that basically spearheaded this, but the township is constantly looking at capital improvements across the board. And there's a lot of options that have been out there that we've talked about as a committee. Every single person up here has been the mayor at one point who have had discussions. Mr. Franzen was kind of the spearhead of a lot of this work. But the one thing I will say is, do the improvements make sense? That was a question you had raised. And I will tell you this, the improvements that we made in this building were absolutely necessary. And I applaud the leadership of this committee, and I applaud Public Works and Mr. Boyd specifically for leading the charge in terms of getting this building done. This building that we have here is an old building, frankly, and this committee took a leadership role in essentially getting it to where it looks like today. I think we deserve a lot of credit for that, for investing that and investing the taxpayers' money. I think the taxpayers deserve that. Most importantly, the people who work in this building every day deserve that. So by no means do I think that the improvements here did not make sense, because it's a building that belongs to us, and it needed to be done. So irregardless of what we do from a capital improvement standpoint, which as I said is a moving target and a work in progress, the improvements were made in this building needed to be done, and I'm glad they were done, and I applaud the leadership of this committee and also Mr. Kramer for helping us get there. Doug, you also want to comment regarding Edmonds, is that correct?
Yeah, it isn't just one program. We do a number of programs with Edmonds. Our accounting program, our finance program, and also our tax program. And the major improvement this time is to upgrade the MCSJ upgrade to version 4.2, which is what the more expensive, I think the expensive was higher than what you clarify as what you would consider normal expenses. So that appears to be what has happened. but that's what it is. But it's a number of programs, it isn't just one program. Both our finance office, our tax office, and basically our voucher PO system work off of Edmunds. So that was what the version update was. And it allows us also to eventually work into a cloud backup type arrangement. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
we're not quite there yet, but we're getting
Thanks, Doug.
there. You're welcome.
At this point, I'm going to ask for, unless the committee has anything else, I'm going to ask for a move to executive session, please. So moved. Mr. Brown, Mrs. Franzen,
What?
or Mr.
Brown.
Mr. Yates, and what's your name here? All in favor? Aye.
We just had a work day on Sunday, which didn't last long, we just had to get rid of some wood that's not gonna burn and get it stuff. But, I think